Hello, everyone, and welcome to Featured Perspectives. I'm Angie Schaefer, Executive Director of the Fund for Education Abroad. We're delighted to have you with us tonight to talk about access and support for international opportunities for athletes during their formative higher education years. Some of you may be familiar with the Fund for Education Abroad, but for those who are not, we welcome you as a friend. The Fund for Education Abroad began in 2010 with a mission to support students traditionally underrepresented in study abroad. A dozen years, 867 scholars, and $2.5 million in scholarships later, we continue this work as the only fully philanthropically funded national nonprofit scholarship provider. We support students with financial need with a focus on first-generation college students, minoritized students, and community college students. We are funded exclusively through philanthropic support from folks like you who are invested in creating accessible and equitable education opportunities for all students, including athletes. We're grateful to have you here with us for this Featured Perspectives event. FEA launched this speaking series to gather thought leaders across industries, travel, education, hospitality, and beyond, and now with sports and athletics, to share their perspectives and spark a change in mindset that leads to action in the future. Perhaps that action is a donation to FEA. You'll see a donation button on the screen that you can click on at any time throughout this evening's event. Perhaps that action is to become an application reviewer for FEA or working with our alumni to provide career guidance and mentorship. Perhaps it's action in your own professional line of work or with your alma mater. Regardless of your action, we're happy to have you with us today and look forward to the conversation that it will bring. We're grateful to Salve Regina University's Center for Global Engagement and Fellowship for sponsoring this event. Shout out to a good friend of FEA's, Joe Marangolo, in the Salve Regina office. We hope that, like Joe, you'll become a partner in our work and help us reach a significant benchmark, supporting a total of over 1,000 scholars by the end of 2023 through scholarships and programming. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Ashley Germain, President of the Worldwide Terps, to introduce tonight's featured speaker, Tim Bryson.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Germain. I'm a student athlete at the University of Maryland. I'm from Montreal, Canada, president of Worldwide Terps. And fun fact about me, I speak French. So today I'm here to talk about one of my friend, Tim. So when I met Tim, he gave not only to myself, but to multiple international student athletes the push that we needed. And first of all, let me start by saying that, okay, Tim went to the University of South Carolina and Ohio State University, but I met him at UMD, where he was the program director for student athlete career development. And he's now the director of athlete education and compliance at Mogul. He also has his own podcast named Walk with TFB. So, go check this out. And I'm just going to say this. If you have a plan and you have the resources, anything is possible. And Tim is the person who helped me understand that. He opened a door that not anybody would be willing to open for international student athletes. And what I mean by that is oftentimes when we hear international, people freak out a little bit because it's foreign, it's different. But Tim understood that, and he's ambitious. He'll get things done, and he'll do it in a way that you enjoy. And I'm saying that, but it's just not international student athlete, but students in general. Tim helped me creating our LinkedIn profile. He got us internship, work on our resumes and stuff. He also helped. He also got us into networking and building, forming new connection. He does it all, and all that while pursuing a PhD. So I have to give it to my man. All I'm saying is, y'all better walk with him. So, Tim, you're up.
Queen Ashley, thank you so much for the introduction, yo. You had me crying over here, and they actually caught me taking a picture of you that I'm gonna post on the Instagram, of course, after this talk is over. But what I'm gonna do now is share my screen and get into this talk today. is. So let me go ahead and add here. Window, Chrome tab, boom. Awesome. So we should be seeing my screen now. And again, the title of my presentation is Zero Stepping the Status Quo, Supporting International Opportunities for All Athletes. Now, as Angela said, this is a feature perspective. A shout out to the Fund for Education Abroad. But it should have been called a Tim Talk. Shout out to Ted. Ted gets a lot of credit in this world, even though it's not a real human. This is my first Tim Talk, one that I'm very excited to deliver today. I'm bringing my friends on a little bit later. But our agenda for today, first and foremost, like who is talking, right? Who is Tim Bryson? We'll then get into my introduction to international education, to which Ashley expressed a little bit earlier. We'll talk about both outbound college athletes, but also inbound college athlete experience as well. We'll reflect a little bit individually and as a collective, and then we get to kick it with some of my friends who I've invited to join me on this talk today. So first and foremost, as Ashley said, my name is Tim Bryson. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a Black millennial educator. I'm going to start with this because my Blackness, my millennial identity, and my belief that education can change this world guides my mission statements to help all people identify their passion, inspire vision, and walk in purpose. My story starts on the campus of Florida A&M University, though I was raised in Cincinnati, Ohio. I grew up in the state of South Carolina, where I was a track and field athlete at Coastal Carolina before transferring to the University of South Carolina, where I earned my bachelor's degree. Spent time in Columbus, worked at the NCAA national office before moving to Maryland, as Ashley mentioned, where I recently served as the program director for student athlete career development. Outside of work and school, yes, I do have a podcast. I enjoy craft beer and visiting craft breweries. I believe that Drake is the GOAT and LeBron is also the GOAT. But we're not here to debate music, right, nor sports. What we're here to talk about is international education. My introduction to international education started in June 2010 as a student athlete, a high school student athlete at St. Xavier, where I was offered the opportunity to study abroad, to do service abroad in Ecuador, in Guayaquil specifically. You see the picture on the left, like a kid, that's a decade ago. Then the picture on the right is me with a few of my classmates who spent about 10 days in Ecuador, which is a phenomenal experience, my first experience out of the U.S. As you can see on this picture on the right, this picture is indicative of what study abroad and particularly education abroad looks like right now. Not much racially diverse, primarily white students who are studying abroad or participating in education abroad experiences. But for me, this is an experience that I hold near and dear to my heart because the first time that I not only left the country, but was able to be in an environment where I felt like an outsider. Just 6 months later, I was able to travel to Australia, December 2010. The picture on my left is my mentor, I call my dad, Ilya Thomas, who offered me an opportunity to come to Australia, 18-hour flight, leaving out of LAX, to spend time with his family on a Christmas trip, given U.S. culture. Again, another dope experience that I had, a second time leaving the country in 6 months. And it was at that moment that I realized that I wanted to do something outside of myself. I wanted to participate in activities and leadership outside of the U.S. Norm and U.S. culture. But didn't necessarily know how, right? Yes, I work with students at the University of South Carolina, Ohio State, but I was still searching for opportunity to get back and get involved in international education. Which takes us about 10 years forward to Friday, February 21st, 2020. This screen that you're seeing right now are notes from my OneNote document and notes that I took at this session entitled Work Visa Options for Foreign Students. At this time, I was about a year in my role at the University of Maryland, and I was working with international athletes who were looking to stay in the U.S. to live and work and pursue, again, the OPT and H-1B visa. At this point in time, as you can see on the screen, I had no clue what H-1B, OPT, CPT meant, let alone what it stood for. But I sat in that meeting on that Friday at 1 o'clock, just taking notes, scribbling notes on my laptop. And so I got to figure this out. Because if I'm dedicated and if I truly mean what I say in regards to supporting all students' career readiness, I'm at the University of Maryland, I need to figure out how I can best support international athletes, particularly from a career perspective. Which takes us to about a week, 2 weeks later. These two words on the screen, right, this month and this year, elicit a lot of thought, a lot of emotion, a lot of memory, a lot of reflection on what that meant, not just for the United States, but for the world, but in particular the ongoing global pandemic. March 2020 was it was a very pivotal experience for me because this really changed the trajectory of not just my education, not just my research, but my lived purpose on this earth. Fall 2020, I started my PhD at the University of Maryland. And in spring 2021, I took a class with Dr. Taylor Woodman, who introduced me to the world of international education. Up to this point, I had no clue international education was a field, let alone an industry that I could pursue and participate in at all, for that matter. But during this class, I learned about diplomacy, virtual exchange, I mean, anything and everything under the sun, including the prestigious Fulbright scholarship. After being introduced to Fulbright, I knew I wanted to pursue Fulbright at some point in my college career. And so if any of y'all have a connect to Fulbright, please let me know. Happy to talk with you further after this talk. But as after researching in Fulbright, I said, yo, like, out of all the awards I'm seeing online, no one has researched and or spent time looking at the intersection of international ed and sport, right? No one has spent time looking at the intersection of international ed and athletics. When we talk about diplomacy, we didn't talk about sport diplomacy in my course. So I said, like, where does sport fit into this international ed culture? To what Angela had expressed a little bit earlier today. This is a few months later, August 13th. This is a real email, 2021. I found out about the NASFA Rise Fellowship Program. And this is an email that I sent to their leadership inquiring whether or not I would even be considered eligible for the program. As someone whose full-time job was in athletics, but spent a lot of time working with our International Student Scholar Services Office, Office of International Affairs, right, advising worldwide TERPs, I still didn't know if my role and position, particularly within sport, would be considered eligible for the NASFA Rise Fellows Program. To be transparent, I was initially denied from this program. I was fortunate enough to be accepted into this program in early 2022. And then a few months later, I got to travel to Denver, Colorado for the NASFA 2022 annual convention. As you see on the left side of the screen, there were 6,000 attendees, over 200 sessions, and 40 pre-conference workshops. If you caught the gist of my presentation so far, out of these 200 sessions and 40 pre-cons, there was not one session, not one, that was deliberately focused on international college athletes, athletics, college sport, or student athletes. I wrote a blog about this and I entitled it "Say What's Real" because at that point, I did not know where I fit in and let alone if I fit into the international ed space. I thought about changing my research a little bit. I thought about, joining one of the affinity groups that was more aligned with where trends were heading as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I realized that in Denver, Colorado, that was my mission, my purpose, to sit at this intersection of international ed and sports, which we'll talk about right now. It was in Denver that I realized that we were still in the status quo, right? This place in our world, this place in our industry where we continue to bump against what's normal, to a place where we continue to bump against, not challenging certain systems, certain ideas, certain policies and practices that particularly exclude international athletes and college athletes from international education experiences. I began to ask myself the following question. One, does sport have a place in international ed? Two, why aren't college athletes represented in academic research and institutional practices related to education abroad? And three, where do I fit in? Where does Tim Bryson fit in all of this? And as I finish in that blog, I write down that I don't belong to an association, not the NCAA, not NASFA, not any association dedicated to a specific functional area, but I belong to my purpose to help all people identify their passion, inspire vision, and walk in their purpose. So I went to the DEI statement, right? Took a Euro step, took a pause, changed directions. I looked at Fulbright, right? We respect all peoples and cultures, value diversity, and are committed to international ed and mutual understanding. Sounds cute. NASFA, same thing, right? We model inclusivity in practice and policy and maintain an environment that respects principles of equity, justice, and impartiality. The NCAA has an Office of Inclusion, a dope office led by Shay Wallach, to be exact. And they mentioned that diversity and inclusion improve the learning environment for all college athletes and enhance excellence within the NCAA. As you can see, we're pretty aligned. IIE, Institute of International Ed, they had 3 elements of DEI and 5 focus areas of talent, work, governance, opportunity, and training. I pulled 4, but you can look at your respective department, institution, or organization. I'm going to insert your own DEI statement there as well on the screen. But at the end of the day, none of which include the college athlete. So again, which is why we're here. Here's why, right? International ed is without college athletics, no mention. College sport refuses to acknowledge international education as a core value of their enterprise and our enterprise as well. And simply put, it's incomplete, right? International ed is incomplete and college athletes are incomplete until we both acknowledge, respect, support, and advocate for one another. So first, I want to look at the outbound experience of college athletes. For those who are on the call, I think we can make an assumption and or have done research on the benefits of education abroad, whether that's improving language skills, enhancing your network, new cultures and perspectives, career opportunities is super important. Lifelong friends is definitely a byproduct. People talk about worldview, right? Communicating with different types of people, saving money on tuition, which is something I wish I would have done, though I didn't have the money in undergrad. boosting employability, which is congruent with career development, and practicing independence and self-reliance. Right, these are all benefits of education abroad, and again, these are things that we already know, things we could have assumed, and things that we may have been introduced to on this current slide. But at the end of the day, education abroad takes time and money. That's straightforward. You got to have the time, you got to have the money. A lot of critique and assumption as to why college athletes don't study abroad is because there isn't time to do so in their schedule, right? But when they do have the time, is there opportunity to train while they're in a new country? Do we have the money? Do they have the money to support their own experience? Again, assumptions that we can make and excuses, to be honest, in regards to why we cannot and choose not to support college athletes' education abroad experiences. But we talk about time and money, but athletic competition abroad is rampant right now. I counted when putting the slide together. These are 61 men's basketball programs across the U.S. higher education who have all chosen to not just plan, but participate in athletic competition abroad to play a few games, in their words, and bond as a team during a potential life-changing trip. Hopefully the words on the screen aren't too small, but if you are able to view the institutions and dates and countries on the screen, most, if not all, these countries are in Europe, Australia, and Canada. There are a few one-offs that are in non-European, Australian, Canadian countries like South Africa, countries in the Caribbean. But for the most part, they're in those countries I just mentioned before. Yes, we find time to do athletic competition abroad because, as Giannis, Luka, Kobe, and Damian Lillard have all mentioned, right? When you're playing overseas and you're not playing in the U.S., you become a better athlete. You become a better player, which is aligned with critique in regards to college sport, in regards to we continue to invest in athletic identity. And so if we continue to invest in athletic identity, can find the time and money to support education abroad trips, athletic competition abroad trips, why can we not do that for education abroad trips as well? But it's okay because we find the time, we find the money to do service abroad. This is a screenshot from Clemson University, right? The Paul program, the Paul Journey. The Paul Journey is a journey that's supported through the football program at Clemson. And they support abroad service trips every year for their football college athletes. Right? They found the time, they found the money, they created the time, they fundraised the money to create service abroad trips, right? So we have athletic competition abroad, we got service abroad, but when it comes down to education abroad, people go ghost. People go ghost. And I was curious as to why is this a thing, right? Why do we not find the time, the money, the commitment to prioritize education abroad for all college athletes, right? Supporting international opportunities for all college athletes. One of my biggest critiques in education abroad is that you don't necessarily have to be physically mobile to encounter intercultural, conversation, to become interculturally fluent. Primarily because international college athletes are coming to the U.S. in high numbers right now. So, which is now we'll focus on the inbound college athlete. As we know, the U.S. is a top destination for international students studying abroad, and research suggests, right, that the higher ed system, value in international labor market, and job opportunities are reasons why. College athletes are both pushed and pulled away from their home country to the United States. International students in particular are often viewed as short-term sojourners, right? They stay for a little bit, relocate voluntarily to compete and or study, and then with plans to return home. This is all fun, but becomes more real when you think about how international students overall contribute $45 billion to the U.S. economy, right? It's not just an education experience. Many people look at this as a business, and how do you conduct business in a way that's socially just and equitable, particularly for the student who is physically mobile. But we're going to continue talking about how we can better support international college athletes, particularly given that international college athletes are coming from countries that are not standard nor congruent to international students coming to study in the U.S. As you see on the screen right now, the top 10 home countries for both first-year Division I international athletes and Division II international athletes are primarily coming from Europe, Canada, and Australia and New Zealand, which is contrary to China and India representing over half of the international students studying in the U.S. higher education system. As we can see, this chart runs from 2014 to 2019. Numbers from 2020 and beyond are coming in now, and we're happy to share those numbers once they come in from the NCAA research office. But it's important to note as we think about resources and support for international college athletes on U.S. higher education campuses. It's also important because during the years 2014 and 2018, there was a drop in new international student enrollment, which is the number on the left, right? In a new international student enrollment decreased 2.69%. During the same time period, new international college athlete enrollment increased 21%. Reasons why, of course, sport globalization, number one, and higher education internationalization, number two. This is important to note that because during this time period, from the visa application process and the U.S. social and political environment, international enrollment decreased, international athlete enrollment increased, which required a lot of athletic departments to think more critically about how we support international athletes in our care. So the NCAA got involved, and I brought my friends with me to talk more about this. But in November 2021, there was a think tank to which I was part of, and we spent, literally 4 hours discussing the challenges and opportunities for international college athletes in U.S. higher education. What you see on the screen are challenges that international athletes themselves and international staff members mentioned are happening currently, right, on college campuses across the United States. Lack of knowledge on U.S. academic structure is super important to note, particularly with major selection and the connection with career development for those who want to stay to live and work in the U.S. Ongoing difficulties related to mental health and finances and immigration laws, particularly name, image, and likeness, which we'll talk about during our panel. Institutional silos, and this is a direct quote from an athlete, right? They said, and I quote, "It's a dotted line that I had to create for myself," right? Why are we putting the onus on international college athletes to do the work that staff are hired to do and to figure out on our campuses? And then last but not least, right, understanding of race and racism. Given that we've had more poignant talks about race and racism over the last few years, how are we being mindful of the cultures and the environments that international college athletes are coming to the U.S. with, and making sure that they're aware of what's happening, but also they can continue to advocate for justice as well. So the purpose of this talk is to focus on supporting international opportunities for all athletes. And we looked at this statement, if you will, from two different lenses, both from the inbound athlete and the outbound athlete as well. But one thing I want to make sure that we do is also reflect on our own practices, privilege, power, and platform. To which I asked this first question, right? How am I using my privilege, my power, my platform, your privilege, your power, your platform for equity and justice for all college athletes, both inbound and outbound? What are college athletes experiencing on our campus that they aren't considering education abroad as an opportunity? Gone are the days where we point the finger at the person, but really look at the environment that we're creating to create a more inclusive and encouraging environment for education abroad to be a possibility. Which policies and practices maintain college athletes as a forgotten community in global education? And I think that's straightforward, despite numbers that indicate between 35 and 40% of college athletes, study abroad. Gen Z calls that cap, and I would agree, because we aren't seeing that in the research and practice on Division 1, 2, and 3 campuses across the U.S. How are you contributing? How are we contributing to an environment that promotes and supports education abroad for all athletes? Where's the link between ed abroad, international affairs, and college athletics on your campus? And how can we create environments that mirror diversity of our college athlete and international student population? Right, these are questions that I ask us to reflect about and think about, not just now, but leaving this talk in this session as well. Some thoughts as we move into the panel discussion, right? First and foremost, think about designating an international college athlete liaison in both your college athletic department and international ed office. These people, this team can be a concrete point of contact for all international athletes on your campus, but also can be the point person for college athletes interested in participating in education abroad experiences through your office. International athlete-specific orientation and education, is super important as well. I mentioned some of the programs that Clemson and some other schools have done related to traveling abroad, but how can we also focus on dedicated fundraising for these experiences? Right, we raise money for a lot of facilities, a lot of services and programs, but we need to be more considerate of raising money for global experiences as well. Alumni engagement, I think, is huge. Many alumni offices and some associations do not have an international athlete, let alone international student council, alumni council, which can be important for mentorship. Focus on career readiness, right? The National Association of Colleges and Employers mentioned global intercultural fluency as a skill to be competitive in one's job search, right, in one's career, and one that we can focus and highlight as well. Virtual exchange programming is also another opportunity for us to consider, to think about how we can create international opportunities. Yes, physical mobility is important, but for those who may not be able to participate in physical mobility programs, we can still create intercultural exchange through virtual and digital platforms as well. And last but not least, right, donating money, giving money and investing money to organizations like the Fund for Education Abroad to support scholarships for students and college athletes who want to participate but may not have the funds to do so. A few examples before we close out. Taylor Brown is a former George Mason basketball athlete and also professional women's basketball athlete. Has done a phenomenal job in creating the TB31 videography program, which recruits college athletes to participate in a career development experience in the Dominican Republic, to where they're traveling abroad, right? They're gaining experience in videography or learning it themselves, but also being introduced to a culture at a time during the summer to where they may not have had another opportunity to do so in their home city or home country. Another glowing example, as hard as this is for me to mention as an Ohio State graduate, is the University of Michigan football program led by Jim Harbaugh. In 2017, Coach Harbaugh made a commitment to creating global classroom experiences through education abroad experiences. Since Jim got there, they've been to Italy, they've been to Rome, they've been to South Africa, and of course the global pandemic halted their international travel, but they're getting back to education abroad experiences to provide an experience for all Michigan football players to see something new, but also learn something new as well. Another glowing program, we'd be remiss if I didn't shout this one out, is Maryland's Worldwide Terps program, to which Ashley is the president. This student organization focuses on community building and resources for both transitioning in and out of the U.S. higher education system, but also career development, to which I know Ashley would talk about during our panel as well. Global Cards is a student international athlete organization and initiative at the University of Louisville, to which future Dr. Ancia is the advisor. They do a lot of phenomenal work with not just representation, but also advocacy around international college athletes during the academic advising process and career development process as well. And last but certainly not least, Hawker Family Sports and Entertainment, an agency firm that does phenomenal work as well, not just educating, but also advocating in a way that is socially just, that is diverse and reflective of what's happening, not just in the U.S. higher education system, but globally as well. As I conclude this talk and open it up for the panelists, and really just three statements that I have for us, right? All basketball related. Number one, stop traveling, right? Traveling in basketball is when you move without the ball bouncing for more than two steps. We've been in this cycle, right? The status quo, just walking, right? Traveling. And have not taken the time to hit the Euro step and just pause and move in a different direction, right? It's okay. It's going to look different, and that's fine. It should. But if we want to support all, international opportunities for all college athletes, we have to do things that we have not done before. And when we do so, we can continue to keep walking and to ensure that every single college athlete has the opportunity to not just participate in education abroad, but can walk in their purpose as well. So with that, I'll open it up for questions, comments, feedback, and reflection, and turn it over to Angela, who will introduce our panelists for a continued conversation.
Thanks, Tim. So that was a wonderful talk. Got me thinking about working at both a small private liberal arts college and a big D1 institution, and just the best practices that I think some of the institutions definitely had in place, but then ways that they can improve the experience as well for everyone. So I'm really excited to introduce our panel, who's going to talk with Tim about the issue of athletes and international opportunities on our campuses. Ancia Eiffel is the Associate Director of Academic Services for Athletics at the University of Louisville. In this position, she is also responsible for assisting student athletes with a variety of learning techniques, which include metacognitive strategies, note-taking strategies, and time management skills. Additionally, Ancia serves as the Louisville International Family Enrichment Life Advisor, assisting international student athletes with their transition, and the athletics representative on the International Affairs Advisory Committee. Ancia is a native of St. George, Barbados, and a 4-year tennis letter winner. Ashley Germain has introduced herself, and we're really happy to have her here. She's from Montreal, Canada, and Ashley is also a junior student athlete on the track team at the University of Maryland and currently the president of Worldwide Terps. Fear the turtle. Ashley Taryn Jones is VP of Strategic Partnerships and Environments, a work lab, LOT systems, and technology company based in Baltimore. He has worked in the commercial real estate field since 2008, and prior to that did international sports marketing for Under Armour and worked for the national governing body for lacrosse in the UK. Ashley played 4 years of college lacrosse as an international student at Goucher College in Towson, Maryland. Go Gophers! Prior to his college experience, Ashley grew up in Manchester, UK. And then Tay Hawker, MSLB, is the Chief Executive Officer at Hawker Family Sports and Entertainment, a full-service sports agency specializing in the development of college talent supporting athletes into the professional leagues. Tay was formerly an international student athlete playing rugby at Lindenwood University before getting his master's in sports law and business. Tay is an active advocate of international rights and freedoms here in the United States. Please join me in welcoming all of our panelists.
My people, man. So excited to get you on the screen, yo, because as I was talking, I couldn't see myself. But two, I finally get which is hard enough. But two, I get to spend time with y'all, right? And I'm gonna first start with Ashley here, because I know everyone's fired up and ready and got something to say. But Ashley, right? We mentioned worldwide terps. You mentioned in your introduction. I also mentioned in the presentation. But just share more about what worldwide terps is, and why it was important for you to serve as president during this academic year.
Okay, so Worldwide Terp is a program really that focuses especially on international student athletes. So my role as a president is really to like make sure that everybody's all set, that we get internship for international students, that we help them with their resume. It's all about building their profile and help like their journey, like making their journey more easier. Because I went through some issues as a international student, and like I said earlier, it's not everybody who's willing to get involved, and that's why we have to maximize all the resources that we have. And also, I want to make the program fun for everybody. Worldwide Serve, it's about like getting things done, but we can have fun with it. I had an event last week for international students athlete, first event of World Serb, and there's many more coming up. But basically, World Serb is, is the I want to be like the voice for international students. I want people come to me with questions, idea. I want to be like there for them. So it's all about that. It's all about helping each other.
No, I agree. And I think one thing that you mentioned to me last year, right, is that international athletes are not a monolith. And I think in Future Doctor and CA, you talk about this a lot, particularly in the conversation about international athletes. The focus is either Asia and or Europe. Why is it important to consider race and racism, particularly related to Black international athletes, in this conversation about supporting ISAs as a whole?
First of all, thank you, Tim, for having me. Great presentation as always. I think we have to really look at whatever the racial conversations happening in the U.S. And then when we try to recruit international student athletes, looking at what cities they're in, if there are things similar to home, race plays a big factor because, again, I know from speaking from my perspective, like I see myself as being Black but not African American, and a lot of student athletes identify that way. And then when you're kind of grouped into an identity that you don't actually know or actually consider, it's kind of hard to find where your voice can be heard or where you can be seen. Most of our Black international student athletes just want to be included as well, but also having their own identity at the end of the day to be able to say, hey, I still know myself, but I'm not immersed into this culture of being African American.
It's good stuff. Ash, man, just gave a presentation, brief presentation at that. But a lot of the feedback that we've heard, over the last couple of years is that we've been seeing the same issues over and over and over, year in, year out, decade in, decade out. You were someone who entered U.S. higher education a little bit earlier than we did. Can you talk more about, just a little bit, can you just talk more about your experience, not just finding Goucher College, if you will, but also some similarities and potentially some frustrations with we're still having this conversation X amount of years later?
Yeah, it's interesting hearing. It would have been wonderful to have all the advocacy that you guys are suggesting would be the way forward today. I mean, my experience as an international athlete coming into a small Division III school was the number of planets that had to align in order just to get that one person through, and I was very fortunate in that regard, was really, really amazing. And so you had to come from a subset of international students who were romantic about the college athletic experience in the US, right? And it's often quite intimidating. The system is opaque from the outside. Even if you're coming from a a Western, UK, high school, it seems to be almost professional on both on the playing level and on the coaching level, and it seems quite inaccessible. So I was very fortunate that I went to high school in the UK and played lacrosse. That is not a likely scenario to occur. When I went to high school, I didn't even know lacrosse was. I was told I had a choice. I could play lacrosse or rugby, and I knew what rugby was, and I knew I didn't want to play that. So I started my lacrosse journey, and then I was just fortunate to fall in love with the sport and to form a bond with the city of Baltimore. Baltimore hosts the Lacrosse Hall of Fame, and so I came to Baltimore as a high school student. And then I played lacrosse internationally and was fortunate to be back in Baltimore in '98 for the World Championships. And that got me in front of some coaches and allowed me to then understand that, this is the recruiting conversation is something that I could access. But I think about people who have less privilege than I do, and it must be so difficult. And even when once I was on the ground in Baltimore and had been accepted by the team and was enjoying my time there, you still, as an international athlete, you experience loneliness because there are cultural elements that you guys have touched on that don't necessarily translate perfectly, but at the same time, it's the most beneficial experience of my life. And I hope that some of the things that I benefited from in terms of my character being improved by being around American college students and other international students. To be clear, Goucher, is a small school that was one of the very first to mandate that all of its students did international study abroad before they graduated. So I was kind of cross-pollinating the whole time. But also, the idea was that internationals, not just athletes, but internationals in general, are good for the American students on the receiving end as we come in. And it's not necessarily something that I was there to deliberately enact, but just that the cross-cultural stuff is tremendously valuable. But even today, I shudder to think how difficult it is. Even if you've decided as a British athlete, I want to go to college in the US, you need luck, you need resource, you need determination, and then you need someone on the other end to pull you through the system, right? I was very fortunate that my college coach decided that it was worth his time and effort to do that. And so I will always be tremendously indebted to him. And so, but that's kind of my reflection is, and I think that 20 years later, most people's stories will be very similar. There is no approved way to do this. There is no cheat sheet. It's about building relationships. Your access to coaches is hard. Understanding the recruiting process is hard. And the people you're competing with for these limited number of spots, the other American students, continue to optimize everything they can do, right, to be at that, have that opportunity too, which they deserve. But it's a big gap sometimes to jump from an international high school athletic program and then compete with American high school athletes, because they have the investment they have personally and systematically is so impressive.
That's well said, Ash. And I think two things that came out, right, is privilege, right, and stories are similar even 20 years later. And Tay, yes, the stories are similar. I think you're one of the first former international athletes, international staffers I ever met. But one thing that's different in 2022 is NIL. A lot of misinformation out there, right? Some real, some fake. I mean, talk to us. Like, what do people on this call, particularly those who are international educators outside of sport, what do they need to know, and how can they best advocate from their platform, their privilege, and their power as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, I'll say, Ash, thank you so much for not being another Brit playing rugby. New Zealanders don't need that right now. So I appreciate you going down the lacrosse route. But look, NIL is an ever-changing industry for the American athlete. Unfortunately, not quickly changing for the international athlete. And I think that's one thing that I really want to bring to light is the fact that we're looking at over 20,000 student athletes right now who cannot benefit from NIL. And I think that still is coming to a shock a year later to a lot of people that believe it's for everyone. I know a ton of international student athletes that have not been able to do anything and are trying to find ways to still do it. And the scary thing with that is the punishment is so severe in breaking immigration laws, not to mention those immigration laws haven't been changed, or rules haven't been changed since the 80s. And if we take ourselves back to the 80s, we're living in a very different time. We've got Instagram now, which was a very foreign concept in the 80s. So we haven't kept up with times with the Department of Homeland Security hasn't kept up with times when it comes to those freedoms. And now we've found ourselves stuck where international student athletes have amazing brands and such a powerful platform. And, from the capitalist side, brands aren't able to work with them. And they would be people that would be able to reach a massive net of fans all around the world. But then on the athlete side, now you've got international student athletes watching domestic student athletes benefit in this space, while they effectively can't or plan on doing so once they go home. They try to walk the tightrope of quote unquote what is passive income, which every school or every DSO has got a different definition. So again, right now, to kind of answer your question blankly, I advise no international student athlete does anything in the NIL space because we haven't had a clear guidance on how to operate in that space. And to kind of caveat that as well, or to speak on top of that, we're looking at a lot of schools have said the whole licensing agreements are an option where that is considered passive income, but then equally the other half of schools have said no. So what is it? So I could go on for days, so I'll cut myself off, but we really could benefit from obvious reform, but then at the same time, at least some clear messaging.
Well, I mean, retweet on clear messaging for sure, because it still has yet to happen. Like you said, a year and some change in. But future Dr. NC, right, if we can't advocate for NIL, the least we can do is advocate for career development for international students and staff to live and work in the U.S. And you have a lot of experience in this space as well. Can you just talk more about your experience, one, pursuing that visa process, but then two, how can international educators on this call best support international athletes who want to stay to live and work?
I'm going to ask you to repeat the second question in a second. But question one, my journey has been very, very up and down and very difficult. There have been some high, extremely grateful moments for what I have, and I'm thankful for where I am right now career-wise. But like most countries, Canada actually supplies their international students with permanent citizenship in terms of where they need to be at after they spend their 4 years in Canada, while the US is a lot more difficult to navigate the systems. But for me, the process has been lengthy and long, but it's been rewarding in some sense. It takes a lot of time. Sometimes you have to convince your employer that you're good enough to do the job, even if your resume speaks for itself. But someone has to take that risk and take that chance on you. And a lot of employers don't want to do that. But for me, I believe if we're going to recruit and try to retain international student athletes, we need to do a better job of having representation within our athletic departments. We do it on our campuses. We have a whole bunch of international staff. We hire international staff to teach different professors and different levels. So we spend all this money recruiting and recruiting high-profile student athletes. I think we can invest the money into putting and having staff members in place so that international students can feel that they have some sort of sense of belonging. Someone that looks like them in the department, someone that understands their journey, someone has walked in their shoes that they can have a conversation with, someone that they can feel confinement in, that they can, hey, this is where I'm struggling with. How can you assist me with this process? Here's where I'm at. I'm feeling homesick. What can I do in this city that I know nothing about to feel more comfortable? Hey, I would like to go travel a different part of the U.S. Where do you recommend that I go? Again, the student athletes that look like me, they're certain places in different things. It represents different parts of the U.S. So having that opportunity to know how the U.S. operates is a lot better for the students and for the staff as well. And I guess your second question was, how can we better support? I think it's time where we all take risks, take a chance. We, again, as Tay was saying, we're not living in the 80s anymore. There are over 20,000 international student athletes, and I probably we can count all the international staff in college athletics on one hand. So I think it's time we try to even out that ratio and make sure our student athletes are well taken care of on their college campuses and in their cities and feeling safe in their cities. There are a lot of student athletes who feel like they have to wear their university apparel when they walk around in certain cities to feel safe. So at some point in time, we need to start looking at how are we recruiting, how are coaches doing their recruitment, how are you doing your retention, and then also how are you servicing these student athletes after they leave? Because there are options. They can either go home or they can try to stay in the U.S. So what are we doing to make their dream come true? The same way how they've made the university dreams come true of being a high-profile athlete coming from their countries.
Well said, Ashley. You're high profile. I mean, I don't mean to brag on you, but you competed for the national team in Canada. Is that accurate, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. So someone who's studying abroad in the U.S., like, what do you wish more international educators, those people who work in international affairs, those people who work in international student and scholar services offices across the U.S., what do you wish they knew more about the college athlete experience, particularly international college athlete experience?
I think it's, first of all about building a community. Like, I would like for educators to be like, like involved in like what we do, and not only like what we do like in school, but like especially our sport. Like, it's coming to competition, coming to practice, having time to time like face-to-face meetings. Just like getting this feeling of like that we can talk to them without any like issues. I feel like the building this for international students will be so important, because then if we're like comfortable with the educators, then nothing can stop us. Like, if we have this feeling like, working together, then we can do so much. Like, there's resources out there, let's use them. There's resources that we don't have, let's create them. It's all about moving forward and together. So yeah.
No, well said, Ash. Again, you've been around the U.S. now, 20 plus years. Where are we going? Right, you've seen a lot evolve and change, but like, where do you think we're going?
I think that, so I flew to Boston a couple weeks ago. I was on a family trip, and on the airport transfer bus was a British family, and I got chatting to the dad, and his daughter was going to Tufts. She was an incoming freshman. She was a British student. She was going to play tennis.
Yeah.
And she was super. I mean, you couldn't believe how pumped she was. I mean, this for her was as big as making an all-star game, right? And she hadn't even hadn't done one practice yet, but
Yeah.
but you could see the possibilities in her eyes, and I think that sadly, kind of much of what I heard of her story was reminiscent to mine, because of she was an individual moving through this process. What I would say is that one thing I found, which is encouraging, is that more and more people who aren't necessarily specialists in international education, but are related to universities, particularly alums, have the capacity and interest to foster internationals in a purely kind of familiar way. I was very lucky in that regard, and I think that if we can encourage people who are involved in these universities, American universities have this incredible support, right? All of these people who just cherish the idea of being involved, right? Of wearing the name across the chest, right? Of getting those folks to engage and have someone over for dinner, right? Or just have a campfire conversation with someone about how they're doing. I think that kind of stuff is really, really valuable. And I think more opportunities with that because of things like, Tay mentioned social media and all that stuff. But I think that otherwise we're still pushing, right, this boulder up the hill. Right? We really need some really systemic changes to support all of these international folks. But I do believe that the will is there, and I do people want to will open up their arms if they can be shown how to do it and be guided to that opportunity.
I like how you said that, shown how to do it and guided to the opportunity. Tay, before we have final thoughts, man, you're a former international athlete, right? Now business owner, entrepreneur. Is there opportunity for more international athletes to be entrepreneurs in the U.S.? Do you encourage that? If so, how? Just curious to get your thoughts on entrepreneurship right now.
Yeah, I was at the barber the other day, and my barber started pointing out some gray hairs on the side of my head. I dare to guess that might have something to do with international entrepreneurship. Frankly, I would say hold off until we get some sort of law reform. It has been really difficult to kind of go through the process. And so, I'm thankful that I'm standing. It's definitely taught me resilience and diligence, etc., to be able to still be rolling. But it has been a lot more difficult than if I was American born. And so, I would say, pick your battles before going down that road. But I guess that's probably the best way to say it. But I think the biggest takeaway is for any international student athlete or athlete that's got to, I'm a few years out of college now, that has got this far. You've got enough battle wounds and build up scar tissue to be able to be pretty tough. So that's kind of my biggest win in that space.
I love how you said that, bro. So let's go around one time. And the question, I'm reading my phone like Drake in this BlackBerry, but the question for us is, what are 2 things you want our audience to remember about supporting international opportunities for all athletes? So we'll start with AG, I move to Ash, and CA, then conclude with Tay.
Oh, me, not Ash.
Yeah, you first.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, I think to remember, I would say that even though you might not be international, just be an ally. I feel like everybody can like talk for us. Like, yeah, I feel like that. Obviously, I'm gonna try and like improve like programs for us international athletes, but I mean, it's everybody that can be like involved, and I feel like if people talk for us, they might advocate. Let's say like student athletes here at the University of Maryland that might not be international, they can still talk about worldwide tour. They can still advocate for the program. So I would say to people like, don't be scared. Do what's right, and move with us. Like we're all moving forward.
I'll definitely say just be inclusive. Is a vulnerable population, which has many layers to it. I guess being open to hearing their stories, understanding another person's perspective of life and a college athlete, and then also just showing up for them. Show up if you're a college a staff member, administrator. Most of the international students, their parents can't come for senior day. Those little things count for them. Just showing up for senior day, just walking with them, just being there and making sure that they feel a sense of belonging on your college campuses.
I would say never underestimate the value of the international transaction, right? Whether it's American kids going abroad just for spring break or spring training or whatever it is. And Tim mentioned some of those teams that have traveled to Europe or to South Africa or to other places. That's a 2-week trip, right? And much of that time is spent, with the team internally. But the travel together and the exposure to the other bonds you in a way that you can never really understand. And it's not until you're an old man like me that you realize that's what was really important about those experiences. And that's what really made a difference in who I was and who I became. And likewise, those students who are international students coming into the American system, they hold those hopes too. And everybody can affect those experiences to the positive. And so as an internationalist in general, the more that we can encourage and create these collaborations, the better the world will be.
And then from me, I would say put some respect on their name. That's what I've been thinking. So I'm going to say that if any of your international student athletes have taken massive risks to come here, they've shown real hunger. If they're trying to work here, they're showing an even bigger level of hunger and desire to be something and make something of themselves. They've left their family. I once went 5 years without seeing my mum. Like we're really out here trying to do this thing. So we're taking those risks. So when you do see them, show them that respect and know what they've put themselves through to be here. And then the other side of it, and this is a huge shout out to Tim, I still to this day, the most powerful moment I've had as an international student athlete was about 2.5 years ago when I got on a call with Mr. Tim Bryson. And he was the first American really advocating for our rights. It was always other internationals talking about how tough it was, and we would have an international meet and greet. And this, even talking in this group, is definitely therapeutic. But when I got to sit down and sit across from an American that was like, I hear you and I know those problems that you've got and I'm trying to help you, when there's no benefit to Tim, theoretically, obviously on a bigger purpose there is, but we were the ones that are getting affected. So I've still only had that interaction once, and why Tim and I are so close now. But there's an opportunity for American-born people around the country to reach out to the internationals and just be that advocate, and for me that was so powerful. So that would be my second point.
Well, first and foremost, thank y'all for y'all's time today. First and foremost, two, for y'all's talent, y'all's knowledge, y'all's presence on this call. I want to thank you, Ashley, Ash, and Sia, and Tay, for allowing me to be part of y'all journey, and allowing me to continue to advocate for y'all. Y'all know I got y'all back, point blank, period, no matter what. This is only the beginning, right? As Ashley mentioned earlier, we're taking steps, we continue to keep walking to support not just international opportunities for all college athletes, both in the U.S. and beyond, but to ensure that we can continue to do the things that ring true to us, but to identify our passion, inspire vision, and walk in purpose as well. So thank y'all. I love y'all, each and every one of y'all. Ash, I'll get you a beer next time I'm in Baltimore. Ashley, you're too young, but with that, I'll turn it to to Angela, who'll close us out tonight.
Thank you for joining us for this evening's Featured Perspectives event. We're hoping that this time with us catalyzes conversation that carries across campuses, study abroad programs, international recruitment organizations, admissions offices, athletic departments, employers, talent agencies, and beyond. And we're hopeful that you feel more inspired to join us in our efforts to eliminate barriers to international study for students, including athletes. I'd like to send a huge thank you to our panelists and our featured speaker, the soon-to-be Dr. Bryson, for sharing your insights and some very practical ways that we can make a difference for student athletes. I also want to thank our sponsor, Salve Regina's Office of Global Engagement and Fellowship. Joe, you're a great friend of FEA. Thank you for staying on with us. I also have to give a shout out to our behind-the-scenes crew, FEA's program coordinator, Kaylee Henderson, who's been in the chat, and Lindsay Jones, our program manager, who's been producing this event, totally behind the scenes. I also see some trustees on the call as well. We couldn't do this without you. Our fall semester intern, Madison Pastrick, who's actually in Italy, and so it's well past her bedtime. She's probably not here, but she supported outreach for this event. Thank you to Jeremy as well. He's donated during this event, and there's still time to make a pledge if you're so inspired by our talk tonight. I invite you to take a look at FEA's website and follow us on social media for more events like this, and to join us in December for our gala in Washington, D.C., where you might even get to party with a few of our panelists from tonight. Go Lions, go Terps, go Gophers, go Cardinals. Thank you all, and have a great evening.